$750,000, the reporter repeated into the microphone. That is what CEO Rebecca Whitmore is offering to anyone who can help her son speak. The crowd outside Whitmore Global's headquarters erupted with questions. Specialists arrived from across the country. Therapists, neurologists, researchers, and consultants lined up for a chance at the reward. But standing unnoticed near the back entrance was a janitor pushing a cleaning cart, and nobody spared him a second glance. Most people saw Daniel Brooks as the man who emptied trash cans and polished floors. They did not see the tired father who woke up every morning wondering whether he could afford another month of therapy for his own daughter. They certainly did not imagine he carried a secret heavy enough to change another family's life. The November wind swept through downtown Boston as Daniel finished his shift. He was 43, broad-shouldered, with tired eyes that seemed older than the rest of him. He pulled off his work gloves and checked his phone. A message from his daughter waited on the screen. "Did you remember my art project, Dad?" A small smile appeared immediately. "Always." On the passenger seat of his aging pickup truck sat a carefully wrapped cardboard display. He had spent half the night helping her build. The corners were reinforced perfectly. Every measurement was precise. The kind of detail most people would never notice. Daniel drove through evening traffic toward a public elementary school on the edge of the city. Parents filled the parking lot. Children ran through the school hallway carrying backpacks and science projects. His daughter Emma spotted him through the crowd and smiled so brightly that his entire day seemed lighter. "You actually fixed it," she said, examining the display. Daniel shrugged gently. "You did the hard part." Emma rolled her eyes. "You always say that." Daniel never corrected her. Credit had never mattered much to him. On the drive home, they stopped at a grocery store. Daniel carefully compared prices before placing items into the cart. Milk, bread, pasta, peanut butter. He quietly returned 2 items after glancing at the total. Emma pretended not to notice. Children often understood more than adults believed. Near the checkout lanes, an elderly woman struggled to reach a case of bottled water from a lower shelf. Before anyone else moved, Daniel stepped forward and lifted it into her cart. "Thank you," she said. Daniel simply nodded and wished her a good evening. No speech, no performance, just kindness. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep, Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table beneath the dim light. Utility bills rested beside an old photo album. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. He opened the album carefully. Most photographs showed a younger Emma. Others showed a woman smiling beside them both. His late wife. Daniel's hand lingered on one photograph longer than the others. Then he closed the album and looked toward a shelf in the corner of the room. There, tucked behind books and family pictures, sat a worn binder filled with notes, diagrams, and handwritten observations collected over many years. Most people would have assumed it was worthless. Daniel knew otherwise. He stared at it for a long moment before turning away. Across town, Rebecca Whitmore sat inside a luxury penthouse overlooking the city skyline. Her 8-year-old son, Noah, sat quietly beside the window holding a toy train. The boy had never spoken a single word. Specialists had tried everything. Money had opened every door except the one she needed most. Rebecca watched him carefully. "Just one word," she whispered. "That is all I want." Noah looked out at the city lights without responding. Back in his apartment, Daniel prepared for bed. His phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. Another nationally recognized specialist had failed to help Noah Whitmore speak. The reward remained unclaimed. Daniel stared at the screen. Then his eyes drifted once more toward the old binder on the shelf. Something unreadable crossed his face. Not excitement. Not greed. Something closer to concern. Because while the rest of the country was chasing $750,000, Daniel was thinking about a little boy he had never met. And for reasons nobody yet understood, the possibility that Noah might remain silent felt deeply personal to him. The next morning arrived long before sunrise. Daniel Brooks was already awake when the first hint of light touched the apartment windows. He stood quietly in the kitchen packing Emma's lunch while the coffee maker hummed in the background. Peanut butter sandwich. Apple slices. A handwritten note folded carefully into the paper bag. Nothing expensive. Nothing remarkable. Yet he never missed a day. Across the small table sat a stack of utility bills waiting for attention. Daniel glanced at them, then slid them aside. Emma came first. She always had. A few minutes later, he knocked gently on her bedroom door. "Rise and shine, kiddo." Emma emerged, rubbing her eyes and carrying a sketchbook under one arm. She immediately noticed the lunch bag. "You remembered the note." Daniel smiled. "I always remember the note." Some parents measured love through grand gestures. Daniel measured it through consistency. Outside, frost clung to the windshield of his aging pickup truck. The engine rattled before finally starting. As they drove toward school, Emma talked about an upcoming art competition. Daniel listened carefully, asking questions and encouraging her ideas. He never checked his phone, never rushed her. By the time they reached the school hallway entrance, Emma was smiling again. "Thanks, Dad." Daniel watched her disappear through the doors before heading toward work. At Whitmore Global Headquarters, another specialist was arriving to meet Rebecca Whitmore and her son. Cameras waited outside. Reporters continued covering the story. The reward had become national news. Rebecca sat beside Noah in a private conference room transformed into a temporary therapy space. The boy remained silent, holding the same toy train. The specialist tried games, pictures, questions. Noah offered no response. Rebecca's shoulders sank slightly. Another failure. Another disappointment. Meanwhile, Daniel spent the morning cleaning executive offices and conference rooms. Most employees barely noticed him. A few greeted him politely. Others walked past without looking up. During lunch, he sat alone behind the building near a loading dock eating a sandwich from home. His phone buzzed. The school nurse was calling. For a brief moment, fear crossed his face. Parents know that feeling instantly. He answered on the first ring. Emma had become dizzy during class. Nothing serious, the nurse assured him, but she needed to be picked up. Daniel immediately stood. He did not complain about missing work. He did not calculate lost wages. He simply informed his supervisor and left. 20 minutes later, he was sitting beside Emma in the school nurse's office. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and old books. Emma leaned against him while he signed paperwork. "Sorry, Dad." Daniel shook his head. "Nothing to apologize for." On the drive home, they stopped at a diner because Emma had not eaten lunch. She slowly picked at a bowl of soup while Daniel watched carefully. The waitress recognized them. "You two okay?" she asked. Daniel smiled politely. "Just taking it easy today." Before leaving, he quietly paid for an elderly veteran's meal after noticing the man counting coins near the register. He never mentioned it. Emma noticed anyway. She always noticed. Later that evening, after Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, Daniel carried her to bed and tucked a blanket around her shoulders. As he adjusted the blanket, his eyes drifted toward the worn binder on the shelf again. This time he opened it. Inside were years of handwritten notes, observations, communication exercises, and detailed records connected to children who struggled to speak. Page after page. Hundreds of hours. Maybe thousands. The expression on his face was not pride. It was grief mixed with hope. Then his phone suddenly buzzed. An unknown number. Daniel answered cautiously. A calm female voice came through the line. "Mr. Brooks? This is Rebecca Whitmore's office. We would like to speak with you about something unusual." Daniel froze. Across the room, the old binder remained open beneath the lamp. And for the first time, it seemed possible that the secret he had carried for years was about to matter to someone beyond his own family. Daniel remained seated at the kitchen table long after the call ended. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking clock above the refrigerator. Across the room, the worn binder still lay open beneath the lamp. Emma slept peacefully down the hall, unaware that anything had changed. Daniel closed the binder carefully and rubbed a hand across his face. He had spent years avoiding attention, years choosing privacy over recognition. Yet Rebecca Whitmore's office had somehow found him. The next morning, he followed his usual routine. Emma's lunch was packed before sunrise. Her backpack was waiting by the door. A note sat inside her lunch bag, folded neatly as always. When they reached the school hallway entrance, Emma looked up at him. "You seem nervous." Daniel smiled softly. "Doi." She nodded. A little. He laughed quietly. Then I should probably work on hiding it. After dropping her off, Daniel drove his pickup truck downtown. The headquarters of Whitmore Global rose above the city like a monument to success. Glass, steel, and polished marble. He parked several blocks away and walked the rest of the distance. Inside, a receptionist escorted him through executive hallways that seemed a world away from his small apartment and overdue utility bills. Rebecca Whitmore was waiting in a private conference room. She looked tired. Not physically tired. Emotionally tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes from hoping for years and being disappointed every time. Beside her sat Noah, quietly pushing his toy train back and forth across the table. The little boy never looked up. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Rebecca extended her hand. "Thank you for coming." Daniel shook it politely. "I am not sure why I am here." Rebecca glanced at the folder in front of her. "Neither am I, completely." That honesty surprised him. She explained how someone from a local therapy network had mentioned his name. An old recommendation. A family who remembered something he had once done for their child years earlier. Daniel listened without interrupting. Noah remained focused on his train. Then something small happened. The toy slipped from the edge of the table and landed on the floor. Before Rebecca could react, Daniel bent down and picked it up. But instead of immediately handing it back, he crouched beside Noah's chair. "Passenger train?" he asked quietly. Noah's eyes flickered toward him for the first time. Daniel gently turned the train over. "Looks more like a freight engine to me." Noah stared at the wheels. Daniel did not push. Did not ask another question. He simply placed the train back on the table and returned to his seat. Rebecca noticed something then. Noah had maintained eye contact longer than usual. Only a few seconds, but longer than most specialists ever achieved. The room felt different afterward. Not dramatic, just different. Like a door opening a fraction of an inch. Later, as they walked through the building lobby, Rebecca stopped him. "You did not try any techniques." Daniel shrugged. "I was not trying to make him speak." "Then what were you doing?" He looked back toward the conference room where Noah still sat, trying to understand what matters to him. The answer stayed with Rebecca all afternoon. That evening she sat beside Noah in their penthouse apartment overlooking the city skyline. For the first time in months, she found herself thinking less about experts and treatments and more about the quiet janitor who seemed more interested in listening than fixing. Meanwhile, Daniel stopped at a grocery store on the way home. Life still looked ordinary. Milk, bread, homework, dinner. Yet something had changed. Because just before leaving, Rebecca's assistant sent him a message. Rebecca wanted him to come back tomorrow. Not as a candidate for the reward. Not as another specialist. Simply because Noah had asked for the train man to return. And according to his mother, that was something Noah had never done before. The following afternoon, Daniel returned to Whitmore Global carrying the same quiet uncertainty he had felt the day before. He had finished his janitorial shift early, picked up Emma from school, helped her with homework at a booth inside their favorite neighborhood diner, and only then driven downtown. Responsibility always came before curiosity. Emma sat coloring beside him while he finished a grilled cheese sandwich and reviewed one of her art sketches. "Will you be late tonight?" she asked. Daniel smiled gently. "Not too late." He never made promises he could not keep. By the time he arrived at the Whitmore building, Rebecca was already waiting. Noah sat on the floor near the conference room window, pushing his toy train across the carpet. The moment he saw Daniel enter, he paused and looked up. It lasted only a second, but Rebecca noticed. So did one of the specialists standing nearby. Unfortunately, not everyone was impressed. The specialist folded his arms. "With respect, I still do not understand why a janitor is being brought into this process." The words hung in the room. Daniel did not react. Years of being underestimated had taught him that defending himself rarely changed minds. Rebecca felt a flash of discomfort. Part of her wanted to dismiss the comment. Another part still wondered if the specialist was right. After all, she had spent years trusting credentials, research, and experts. Yet none of those experts had ever gotten Noah to request a second visit. Daniel crouched beside the train tracks Noah had arranged on the carpet. He did not speak immediately. He simply watched. Children often revealed themselves when adults stopped trying to control the moment. A few minutes later, Noah moved one train car toward him. It was a tiny gesture. Most people would have missed it. Daniel did not. He gently moved another train car into place and allowed Noah to continue leading the activity. Across the room, Rebecca watched something she had not seen in years. Her son looked relaxed. Not cured. Not transformed. Just comfortable. The difference mattered more than anyone realized. Later that evening, Daniel left the building and found a voicemail waiting on his phone. The landlord was calling about overdue rent. Another bill. Another pressure. He listened quietly while standing beside his aging pickup truck in the parking garage. Then he deleted the message and drove toward home. Worry could wait until after Emma was asleep. When he arrived at the apartment, he found a handwritten note taped to the refrigerator. Emma had gone to bed early. Beneath her drawing of the two of them was a simple message. "Thank you for always showing up." Daniel stood there for a long moment, holding the note. Some rewards never came with dollar signs. The next morning brought another complication. A story about Noah's condition appeared on local television. Cameras once again gathered outside Whitmore Global. Reporters discussed possible breakthroughs and interviewed specialists. Somewhere during the coverage, someone leaked Daniel's involvement. Social media reacted immediately. Some people praised him. Others mocked the idea that a janitor could help where experts had failed. By afternoon, Rebecca's inbox was full of criticism. Several advisors urged her to end the experiment before it damaged the company's image. Sitting alone in her office overlooking Boston, she stared at the messages and felt torn between public pressure and what she had personally witnessed. Then her phone rang. It was Noah's teacher. Rebecca answered immediately. The teacher's voice sounded emotional. "I think you should know something." Rebecca sat up straighter. "What happened?" There was a brief silence. Then the teacher revealed what Noah had done that morning at school. And for the first time, Rebecca began to wonder whether the quiet janitor was carrying a story far bigger than anyone had imagined. Rebecca gripped the phone tighter as Noah's teacher continued speaking. The classroom had been working on a simple activity that morning. Students were asked to choose a picture card and hand it to someone they trusted. Noah had spent several minutes staring at the cards before selecting one. The image showed a toy train. Then, in front of his teacher and classmates, he had pointed toward the classroom door and tapped the card twice. "He has never done that before," the teacher said. "Not with that level of intention." Rebecca sat silently in her office overlooking the city skyline. The train. The same object Noah had shared with Daniel. The connection was impossible to ignore. For the first time in years, hope felt less like a distant dream and more like something fragile she could almost touch. That evening, Daniel arrived home to find Emma waiting beside the mailbox at their apartment complex. She held a letter from school. Her artwork had been selected for a regional competition. Daniel smiled immediately and hugged her. "I knew you could do it." Emma laughed. "You always say that too." They celebrated with milkshakes at the same diner they visited after difficult days. While Emma talked excitedly about the competition, Daniel listened with complete attention. Yet behind his smile lingered something else. Concern. The phone call from Rebecca's office earlier that afternoon had unsettled him. She had invited him back again. Not for another observation. For a conversation. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with the old binder open before him. This time he removed a folded photograph tucked between the pages. The image showed a much younger Daniel sitting in a hospital waiting room beside a little girl no older than 5. Emma. She was holding a communication board covered in pictures and symbols. For several moments he simply stared at the photograph. Then a quiet knock sounded at the apartment door. It was Mrs. Ramirez, the elderly neighbor from downstairs. Her grandson needed help assembling a school project. Daniel never hesitated. 30 minutes later he was sitting on the floor helping the boy build a display while Mrs. Ramirez watched gratefully. Kindness came naturally to him because someone once had shown the same kindness to his family when they needed it most. The following afternoon, Daniel met Rebecca in a private conference room. Noah sat nearby with his train. Unlike previous visits, Rebecca did not begin with questions about Noah. Instead, her eyes settled on the worn binder Daniel carried under one arm. "What is in there?" she asked softly. Daniel hesitated. Then, for the first time, he told part of the truth. Years ago, after his wife died unexpectedly, Emma stopped speaking for nearly 2 years. Grief had closed a door inside her that doctors struggled to reach. Therapy helped, but much of the progress came from thousands of hours Daniel spent learning how to connect with his daughter one patient moment at a time. He studied communication methods at night, filled notebooks with observations, learned how to listen before trying to teach. Rebecca sat perfectly still. Suddenly the binder no longer looked mysterious. It looked sacred. Every page represented a father refusing to give up on his child. Daniel looked toward Noah. "I never set out to become an expert," he said quietly. "I was just trying to reach my daughter." Rebecca felt her throat tighten. For years she had searched for specialists. Yet sitting across from her was someone motivated by something far more powerful than professional success. Love. The room remained silent for several seconds. Then Noah slowly pushed his train across the table until it stopped directly in front of Daniel. It was the clearest invitation he had ever offered. Rebecca noticed it immediately. So did Daniel. But before either could respond, Noah did something neither of them expected. He reached toward the old binder and rested his small hand on the cover. And in that moment, both adults realized that whatever happened next might change far more than one little boy's future. Noah's small hand remained on the worn binder for several seconds. Neither Rebecca nor Daniel interrupted the moment. The conference room seemed unusually quiet, as if everyone instinctively understood that something important had just happened. Daniel slowly opened the binder and turned it toward the boy. Inside were simple drawings, picture cards, handwritten observations, and communication exercises he had once created for Emma. Noah leaned forward. His attention deepened immediately. Rebecca watched in amazement. Specialists had spent years trying to direct Noah's focus. Daniel seemed to attract it simply by sharing something real. Yet the progress created a new problem. Hope. Hope was dangerous when a parent had spent years being disappointed. That evening, Rebecca sat alone in her penthouse staring at the Boston skyline. For the first time in months, Noah had voluntarily engaged with another person. Yet she was afraid to trust what she was seeing. Advisors continued sending messages warning her about public perception. Reporters continued asking questions. Some board members openly criticized her decision to involve a janitor. The pressure was growing from every direction. Meanwhile, Daniel's life remained far less glamorous. The next morning he sorted through bills at the kitchen table while Emma prepared for school. A utility bill sat unpaid beside the coffee pot. The landlord's reminder notice remained tucked beneath a stack of papers. Emma noticed his expression. "Everything okay?" she asked. Daniel folded the bills closed and smiled. "Everything important is okay." It was not entirely true. But parents often carried burdens quietly so their children could remain children. Later, after dropping Emma off at school, Daniel stopped at a church parking lot where volunteers were distributing food boxes to struggling families. He spent nearly an hour helping load groceries into trunks before heading to work. Nobody asked him to stay. Nobody paid him. Service had simply become part of who he was. That afternoon, Rebecca invited Daniel and Noah to spend time together in a quieter setting away from cameras and specialists. They met in a small family lounge inside the building. Noah immediately recognized the binder. This time Daniel introduced a simple game he once used with Emma. No demands. No pressure. Just matching pictures to objects. Train. Chair. Window. Book. Noah participated for nearly 20 minutes without withdrawing. Rebecca sat nearby pretending to read emails while secretly fighting tears. She had not seen her son remain engaged this long in years. Then another unexpected result appeared. When one of the cards slid beneath a table, Noah looked directly at Daniel and pointed toward it. The gesture itself was small, but it was purposeful communication. Intentional. Clear. Rebecca's breath caught. Daniel simply retrieved the card and continued the activity as though nothing extraordinary had happened. That response affected Rebecca almost as much as Noah's progress. Most people would have celebrated immediately. Daniel seemed more concerned with protecting the boy's comfort than claiming success. Later, as they walked toward the parking garage, Rebecca finally asked the question she had been carrying for days. Why are you doing this? Daniel looked genuinely confused. Because he needs someone. $750,000 would change your life. Daniel glanced toward his old pickup truck parked between luxury vehicles. Then he thought about Emma waiting at home. Some things matter more than money. Rebecca stood silently as he drove away. For the first time, she no longer saw a janitor helping her son. She saw a father whose choices were being shaped by love rather than opportunity. Yet just as hope was beginning to grow, a new obstacle emerged. The following morning, a prominent specialist publicly criticized Daniel during a television interview, calling his methods irresponsible and accusing Rebecca of giving desperate parents false hope. By noon, the story had spread everywhere. And for the first time, Rebecca faced pressure to stop Daniel from seeing Noah altogether. By the end of the week, the criticism had become impossible to ignore. News segments questioned Rebecca's judgment. Online commentators mocked the idea that a janitor could help where specialists had failed. Several members of Whitmore Global's board requested formal meetings. Yet Noah continued making small but undeniable changes. He spent longer periods engaged with people. He initiated simple interactions. He even began bringing his toy train to the conference room before Daniel arrived, as though preparing for someone important. Rebecca found herself trapped between public pressure and private evidence. One afternoon, after another difficult board meeting, she sat alone in her office staring at the city below. Her assistant entered carrying a folder. "This arrived for you." Inside were documents Rebecca had not requested. School records, therapy notes, community volunteer references, all connected to Daniel Brooks. At first she assumed someone was trying to investigate him. Then she began reading. Across town, Daniel was helping Emma prepare for her regional art competition. Their kitchen table was covered with paint supplies and sketches. Emma frowned at one section of her project. "It is not good enough." Daniel gently slid the paper back toward her. "You said the same thing about the last one." And a smile touched his face. "Then you won." Emma laughed despite herself. Moments later, Daniel noticed a neighbor carrying groceries up the apartment stairs. He stepped outside and helped without being asked. It was such a normal action that he barely thought about it. Emma noticed anyway. She always did. That evening, Rebecca continued reading the file. The deeper she went, the quieter she became. 10 years earlier, after his wife passed away unexpectedly, Daniel had been offered a full-time position with a respected communication therapy organization. The salary would have tripled his income. The opportunity could have changed everything financially. Instead, he declined. Rebecca frowned. Why would anyone turn down something like that? Then she found the answer buried in a recommendation letter. The job required extensive travel. Daniel had refused because Emma was still grieving and struggling to communicate. He chose to stay home with his daughter instead. Another document revealed he spent years volunteering with support groups for families facing similar challenges. Not for money, not for recognition. Most of those families had never even known his own story. Rebecca slowly closed the folder. For days she had been trying to understand what made Daniel different. Now she finally saw it. His patience was not a technique. His compassion was not a strategy. Everything Noah responded to had been shaped by years of sacrifice as a father. The discovery changed something inside her. The next afternoon, Rebecca met Daniel in a quiet room while Noah played nearby. For the first time she spoke openly. "You gave up a career for your daughter." Daniel looked surprised. "Who told you that? Does it matter?" He glanced toward Noah. "I did what any parent would do." Rebecca shook her head. "No. Most people say that. Not everyone actually does it." Daniel did not know how to respond. He never thought of himself as extraordinary. He only knew there had never been a choice. Emma needed him. End of story. Yet despite Rebecca's growing respect, new doubts were forming elsewhere. One of the specialists who publicly criticized Daniel had requested access to Noah's records. The specialist claimed Noah's recent progress was being misinterpreted and warned that emotional attachment to Daniel could create long-term setbacks. The argument quickly gained support among several advisors. Rebecca suddenly found herself facing a painful possibility. If the pressure continued, she might be forced to separate Noah from the one person he seemed to trust. And neither she nor Daniel knew that Noah was already beginning to sense something was wrong. The pressure reached a breaking point on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Rebecca sat through another meeting with advisors, specialists, and board members, each one insisting that Noah's growing attachment to Daniel was becoming a liability. Some questioned Daniel's qualifications. Others warned that continuing the relationship could create unrealistic expectations for families watching the story unfold across the country. Rebecca listened for nearly 2 hours before finally asking a simple question. Has anyone here spent more than 10 minutes with my son? The room fell quiet. Yet silence did not change the outcome. By the end of the meeting, a recommendation had been placed on her desk. Suspend Daniel's visits temporarily while a formal review was conducted. Rebecca stared at the document long after everyone left. Across town, Daniel knew nothing about the meeting. He was sitting in the bleachers of Emma's regional art competition, applauding louder than anyone when her name was announced among the finalists. Emma smiled from the stage and searched the crowd until she found him. Daniel waved immediately. No matter what happened elsewhere, he never wanted his daughter wondering whether he would show up. Later, they celebrated with pie at their favorite diner. Rain tapped softly against the windows while Emma talked excitedly about future projects. Daniel listened, smiling, but his phone remained silent beside his coffee cup. For the first time in weeks, Rebecca had not called. A quiet unease settled in his chest. He tried to ignore it. That evening, when they returned to the apartment complex, Daniel checked the mailbox and found another overdue utility notice. He slipped it into his pocket before Emma could see. Some burdens could wait. Others could not. The following morning, Rebecca finally called. Her voice sounded strained before she even spoke. Daniel immediately understood something was wrong. She explained the review process, the public pressure, the temporary suspension. Every word seemed heavier than the last. Daniel stood beside his pickup truck listening quietly. When she finished, he looked toward the school hallway where Emma had just disappeared inside. If you think it is best for Noah, then do what you need to do, he said gently. Rebecca closed her eyes. The response somehow hurt more than anger would have. Daniel was protecting her from guilt even now. The next few days felt different for everyone. Noah returned to his specialists. The conference room remained empty. The binder stayed closed. At first Noah seemed withdrawn. Then he became frustrated. His teachers noticed it. Rebecca noticed it. Most painful of all, Noah began carrying his toy train to the front door each afternoon around the time Daniel normally arrived. He would sit there quietly and wait. One evening Rebecca found him asleep beside the door, train still clutched in his hands. Her heart broke. Meanwhile, Daniel tried focusing on Emma and work. He volunteered at the church parking lot food drive over the weekend. He helped a neighbor repair a broken shelf. He attended every moment of Emma's competition. Yet beneath the routine was a sadness he could not fully hide. Emma noticed it first. You miss him, don't you? She asked one night. Daniel looked surprised. Miss who? Emma gave him a look only children can give. The little boy. Daniel did not answer immediately. Finally he nodded. Yeah. Ido. Then came the lowest moment of all. On Monday morning, Rebecca received a call from Noah's teacher. The progress they had seen was slipping away. Noah was withdrawing again. The intentional communication had nearly stopped. The teacher sounded heartbroken. After hanging up, Rebecca sat alone in her office and realized she was in danger of losing something she had spent years trying to build. Her son's trust. Across the city, Daniel was mopping floors when his phone vibrated. A message appeared from Rebecca. It contained only 7 words. Please come. I think I was wrong. Daniel stared at the screen. And for the first time since the separation began, it felt as though the truth everyone had been missing was finally about to surface. Daniel read the message 3 times before putting away the mop. Please come. I think I was wrong. There was no anger in him. No desire to prove anyone wrong. Only concern for a little boy who had been waiting by a door every afternoon. 40 minutes later, his aging pickup truck rolled into the underground parking garage at Whitmore Global. Rebecca was already waiting. The moment she saw him, emotion flooded her face. She looked less like a powerful CEO and more like a worried mother. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "How is Noah?" Rebecca looked down. "Not good." She led him upstairs without another word. When they entered the family lounge, Noah was sitting beside the window holding his train. The room had changed. The specialists were gone. The cameras were gone. The pressure was gone. For the first time, it was simply a child and the people who cared about him. Noah looked up. The instant he saw Daniel, something softened in his eyes. Daniel did not rush toward him. He simply sat on the carpet and placed the old binder beside him. Noah immediately scooted closer. Rebecca watched from across the room, afraid to interrupt. For nearly 30 minutes, Daniel and Noah sat together with picture cards, drawings, and the toy train. No demands. No tests. No expectations. Just connection. The same thing Daniel had once given Emma when grief had stolen her voice. Later that afternoon, Rebecca asked a question she should have asked months earlier. What finally helped Emma? Daniel was quiet for a moment. Through the windows, Boston traffic moved below like a river of lights. "I stopped trying to make her talk," he answered softly. "I started trying to make her feel safe." Rebecca felt tears gathering. For years she had chased solutions. Daniel had chosen understanding. That evening, after leaving Whitmore Global, Daniel picked up Emma from school. The school hallway buzzed with students heading home. Emma immediately noticed the difference in his face. "You saw him again." Daniel smiled. "Yeah." Emma slipped her hand through his arm as they walked toward the pickup truck. "Good." Some children understood healing better than adults. The following week brought a quiet but undeniable change. Noah began initiating more interactions. He used picture cards more consistently. He pointed. He shared objects. He maintained eye contact longer than ever before. Teachers noticed. Rebecca noticed. Even the specialists who had criticized Daniel could not ignore the progress. Then came the meeting that changed everything. Rebecca invited the board members, advisors, Noah's teachers, and several specialists into a conference room. Daniel did not want to attend, but she insisted. He arrived wearing the same simple work clothes he always wore. No suit. No presentation. No prepared speech. Just quiet dignity. Rebecca stood at the front of the room and shared Noah's progress reports. Then she revealed something else. The binder. Years of notes. Years of sacrifice. Years spent helping Emma after losing his wife. Years spent learning because his daughter needed him. Not because anyone paid him. Not because anyone rewarded him. Because he loved her. The room grew still. Several people lowered their eyes. Others stared at Daniel with a completely different understanding. One specialist finally spoke. "You were never trying to teach a method, were you?" Daniel shook his head. "No." The specialist nodded slowly. "You were teaching us how to listen." Silence followed. The kind of silence that comes when people realize they have misjudged someone. Rebecca looked across the room at Daniel and felt something she had not felt in a long time. Respect. Deep, genuine respect. Then the conference room door opened. Noah stood there holding his toy train. Everyone turned. Rebecca's breath caught. Noah looked directly at Daniel. His small hands tightened around the train. The room became completely silent. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper but clear enough for everyone to hear, Noah spoke a single word. "Train." Rebecca covered her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. Daniel did not celebrate. He did not claim credit. He simply smiled gently at the little boy. Because the word was never the real victory. Trust was. Safety was. Connection was. Weeks later, life looked different. Noah continued making progress. Emma won recognition for her artwork. The overdue bills slowly disappeared. Rebecca quietly established a family support program for parents facing communication challenges, naming Daniel as an advisor despite his reluctance. Yet the most important change could not be measured in money or titles. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel stood in a church parking lot helping unload food donations while Emma organized supplies nearby. Across the lot, Rebecca and Noah arrived carrying boxes of their own. Noah immediately walked toward Daniel with his train in hand. This time he did not need anyone to tell him where to go. Daniel knelt to greet him and Noah smiled. A simple moment. A healed moment. The kind that changes families forever. Because in the end, the man everyone overlooked had never been extraordinary because of hidden knowledge or special techniques. He was extraordinary because he chose love over recognition, responsibility over comfort, and compassion over pride. And sometimes the strongest voice in a story belongs to the person who spent years quietly helping others find theirs.